Hello everybody, welcome to my tutorial here on making stable diffusion videos, my quick guide. So this is a quick guide because it's mainly going to just focus on one aspect of the creation. So I do have a complete tutorial here on my site. If you want to look at the playlist for stable diffusion tutorials, you can find it there. So only use this if you've already kind of know how to make the video. This is just going to focus on the strength setting. Now, having said that, though, this is by far the most important setting to know how to use properly because what the strength setting does is it makes your video stay coherent. That is, not change from image to image constantly, and it can also make your video turn out very badly if you don't have it set properly. So I know that this is one of the major issues, and I still, even doing this as long as I still have to tweak every video I make a bit, and I still do get bad videos. It's something that takes a lot of trial and error and can be really frustrating when you're first starting out, especially, if you just set your video up to render 500 frames and you come back and at frame 50 it went to heck and you wasted all that time. So my very first suggestion, start small. Don't start with a 200 frame video. Maybe start with just a 50 or a 100 frame video and kind of get your settings down. And I'm also going to show you my settings that you can probably use for most videos. I do tweak, like I said, I tweak every single video I make just a little bit because there's so many moving parts. Another thing that can slightly affect the video is the scale. If your scale is really high here, what that does is that pushes each iteration it does, that is each iteration within each frame, to look more like the prompt. So if this is really high, it's going to kind of change each frame a little bit more. And like I said, this is actually a change within just that one frame itself. So it's good to leave this probably between, I'd say, 7 to maybe 15 when doing a video. It doesn't have as near a big of effect on it as the strength does, though. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So when I say the strength, this is what I'm talking about, and this will apply to 2D animation mode, 3D animation mode, video input, and interpolation. It'll apply to all of them with video input a little bit less so, and I'll get to that one separately here when I get to that. I'm going to go over all the video modes here. I might not touch on interpolation that much because that is basically just changing from one prompt to another, so I don't think that that is really, I might just skip that one. That's a little different. That's a little different. That kind of morphs just from one prompt to the other, so I'm not sure how much that would really affect the video. It still would, but let's stick to 2D and 3D mode first, and then we'll get to video input. So when I say strength, I'm talking about right here, this section under motion parameters and animation, the strength schedule. So what this does is it tells each frame that it makes for your animation how much that frame should look like the previous frame. So what your instinct is that you want it to be fairly high because then it will make your video not change, not flicker as much, and it looks better. It looks better if you set this high, but only for a little while. Actually, if this is anywhere above 0.65, I would call 0.65 kind of a maximum limit. If you have this at 7 or above, what will happen is it will look great. It'll look almost like a regular video without morphing and stuff for maybe the first 10, 20, 30 frames. But eventually, because it's keeping so much of the previous frame, what happens when Stable Diffusion renders the image over and over again is it really just starts to turn to noise after a while because it's not generating enough new information for each frame because it's keeping too much of the old one. And it only generates about half of your steps. So if you have a 200 steps here, this actually is what affects it. So it will use the higher this is, the less steps it will do, and it'll just take the steps that were already done. So it'll maybe do like at 0.8, I think that'll do out of 200 steps, it'll probably only do like 40 or 60 steps each render. So that's why it starts looking really bad because it's not doing very many steps. So you want this at 0.65. I'd say between 0.5 and 0.65. Normally I do zero point 0.6. That's a pretty good number. At 0.65, you can still get a bit of the noise issues. And if you have it lower than this, it'll flicker quite a bit. And honestly, I don't really like the flickering a whole lot at 0.6. But another thing we have here that helps a lot with that is that cadence schedule, this diffusion cadence. And what this does is this skips frames. So this can alleviate that quite a bit. So like I said, there's a lot of moving parts here. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this down to, let's just say 6 for now. It will look really good also if you do it at 0.8. You'll get really smooth videos. So I'd recommend um, keeping this kind of high. And let's just do this. Let's do this. And let me just show you my settings. So this is pretty much default, except I think the default for the strength schedule is 0.65. Let me first show you what I mean, and this will probably look familiar to you. If you've had this issue where your video starts off good and starts looking bad, this could be it. Now, another thing is the zoom, the speed settings. So in 3D mode, which I'm in now, this is what determines the speed, and I have 1.01, which is really slow. That's another thing too. If this is going too fast, if it's zooming really fast, it'll have a hard time keeping up and generating the information. But I basically just want to show you right now what the strength schedule will do here. And I've got my diffusion cadence on 6. And I've got my prompt here. It is A Castle in a Fantasy Landscape by Larry Elmore and Giovanni Battista Piranesi. Matte painting, concept art, art station, fantasy art, deviant art. So just kind of a normal landscape scene here with a castle. And I'm going to go ahead and change my batch name here really quick to strength. Okay. And the other thing, like I was saying, is the scale. I have my scale at 12 right now, 200 steps. I usually put this up high too, because the higher the steps are, the more steps it will do for each frame of the video. It'll take longer, but remember, it's cutting these based on the strength schedule up here. It's already going to cut them, and you'll see that right now, especially at 0.8. It's going to start not rendering very many frames at all. So let's go ahead and start this running. We'll see how my first image comes up here. I might change the prompt. If it doesn't look good, I just made this prompt up for this tutorial. Try to do a little more interesting one this time than usual. And the other thing I'm going to do too after I do this is I'm going to get the seed, and I'm going to post the seed up here. Oh, it's already on 1. Okay. So that's a good idea when you're experimenting with your settings. After you make a video, pick your seed or go and generate it after it's been made, and then use that seed each time. What that'll do is it'll keep your animation exactly the same as before, except for the changes you made. So this gives you a way that you can tell what those changes are doing. Okay, and I've already got an error here. Let's see what's going on here. Must be a real number. Render animation. A range of -1 to -1. Let's go see here. Oh yeah, this is the other thing. If you get this, turn use depth warping on. That is an issue that has come up, I think, since this cadence feature has arrived. So if you're having this issue, there it is. I forgot to mention that. Okay, let's try this again. So hopefully I'll troubleshoot this issue too, and I'll go ahead and keep this in the tutorial if you're having this. And what this depth warp does, I believe this only affects the 3D mode. We can try it when we get to the 2D mode though and see. My preference when I make animations is always the 3D mode, just because you have a lot more control over the movements. In 2D mode, you can only control these 3 parameters. In 3D mode, you can control like rotation, camera, dolly, that kind of thing, rotating right, left, etc. So this should work fine and dandy this time. Okay guys, so it started to render again. I want to point this out too. So right now it's running 250 frames, or excuse me, steps, and that's based right here on my steps, my 250 steps. You'll see as soon as it hits frame 1, that number is going to decrease drastically, the number of steps here, and that is based on the strength setting. That again is one of the big reasons why your image will turn into noise after a while if that is too high, because it's just not doing very many steps. Okay, and there we go. And you see how it's skipping these frames? That is all due to that cadence schedule, which is a really great feature. Okay, so as you can see, it's starting off good here, and I'll go ahead and let this run for a while. When it starts getting bad because I have my strength setting so high, I'll come check back in with you and show you the results here. Okay, I'm back, and I can already tell that it's probably not going to take very long. One of the signs is you see these lines. It'll start making these lines, and it'll just get really, really low resolution. You'll start seeing a bunch of lines on the screen or dots, that kind of thing. And that's a direct effect of that strength schedule being so high. And the cadence feature, I think you can set that. I usually have that between 6 and 8. I have made a lot of videos with it up all the way at 8. That kind of has the same sort of effect. It kind of but not as much. So you can also try to turn that down. Again, all these things are working in tandem. This is like an orchestra. There's so many moving parts here when we're making these animations. Like I said, the scale can affect it a bit right here because this really pushes it to be more like your prompts. So it's a good idea too to kind of keep that kind of low. The steps can affect it, your resolution can affect it, the prompt itself can affect it. Some prompts just have seems kind of like more power than others, where I don't know exactly how that works, but some of them can just really affect things. So as you can see now, you see how all these lines are developing now, and it's just getting really bad resolution here. I'm already at frame 70. But I'll go ahead and let this finish just to kind of show you, just so you can see, yeah, that's the issue I'm having. And that is because that strength setting is too high. If you notice too, you can see it's only rendering 50 steps right now for each image. So that's one of the reasons why. It's just only doing a 50-step generation. And so it's just not having enough time to really render a good image anymore because that strength setting is too high. And this is with, I have it set up to the max, which is 250. So that's the other thing. Try to set your steps up really high when you're making an animation. I think you can go up to like 252 or it's somewhere between 250 and 260. I don't think 250 is quite the max, but 250 is usually good enough. And you can see right now what's happening. It's getting these lines. It's just not looking good. Okay, everybody, our video frame here is winding down here. You can see we have got garbage there. That is a horrible looking castle. I don't want to post this on the internet. This won't get me followers. This won't get me likes. Okay, so this is all going to be that strength schedule for the most part. Like I said too, it can be the other things as well, but that's your biggest factor here for these animations is that strength schedule. So let's go ahead and let this finish, and I'm just going to render this out just to show you guys, and this probably looks familiar. Another thing that'll happen is it'll turn into little tiny dots just on a black square. And I've had plenty of bad videos both with this and Disco Diffusion. Disco Diffusion had this issue particularly hard. So that's why I really liked making videos with that because it took a lot of tweaking and a lot of kind of, I guess, skill, I guess, to do it. So after a while, I got pretty good at it. But let's go ahead now and see our lovely castle here just disintegrate into garbage. Starts off okay, and already it's looking bad. And now yeah, that's horrible. That is horrible. And you know what? I might change this. No, I'm going to keep the seed. I was going to say I might change it just to give us a little more color, but we want to be consistent. So yeah, that's what happens. So now let me go and show you the other opposite end of this, which you also do not want. Let's go ahead and change the strength schedule now real low. Right now it's at 0.8. So we can put it at 0.2. Now this is going to give us lots of detail. It's going to keep our detail, and it's going to render more frames. Like I said, the higher that is, the less it has to generate, because that's what it's doing basically. When you have that high, it's skipping a lot of the steps to make the new image, and it's just maintaining the old image. So let's go ahead and run this, and I'll go ahead and change the batch name a little bit just to keep all these separate. So this will actually take longer too, because it's going to be rendering more steps for each frame. But it will have the detail. We should not now have that issue where it's looking like it just did, where it loses all the detail and turns into pixels. This should alleviate that problem for us, but give us a different one. Okay, it's done with that very first frame now. That very first frame takes all 250 steps. And there we go. So this starts off looking exactly the same as our last one because we're using the same seed. So I want to point this out. Now, if you'll notice, on our last one, it was doing 49 steps for each frame. Now it's doing 200 steps for each frame. So now it should maintain the detail. It's not going to look like the last one will, but you'll notice a new issue come up here. And what's that? There's our next frame. Yeah, there's lots of detail, but that doesn't look like the castle we were just looking at, does it? So what this is going to do is this is going to constantly morph our image and change it, and it's not going to look like a coherent video. It's going to look like a bunch of slides that somebody put in, kind of like when I do my weekly slideshows. Of course, those are intentionally different images. So this isn't really going to make us a very good video. This is going to be just and look at that. See, that looks nothing at all like our last one. What is going on here? So this is the opposite end of the spectrum. So while this will cure our problem of losing the detail because it's doing a full 200 steps there, we have this new problem where our image is stuck in some kind of a time bubble and it doesn't stay the same. So this is not going to make a good video. But again, I'll go ahead and let this render out a little bit, and I'll come show you the results here. Okay, well, guys, I don't think I really need to let this finish. I'll just let's go ahead and stop it there. Let me see if I can make a video out of what we got. I'm not sure if it will or not, but let's try it. But basically, though, it's just going to be a video that is just changing from frame to frame and looks horrible. There we go. See, so it's just constantly morphing. So this is what happens when our strength there is too low. We get nice looking images, but they do not relate to the previous one. So let me show you kind of an ideal setting here. And if you don't want to, experiment with this and, tweak your settings, here, I'm going to give you a good one here that should work on most things. So I'm going to put a strength scheduler of 0.6. You will still get a bit of morphing here. And I'm going to go ahead and crank the diffusion cadence all the way up to 8. So we will still get some morphing with it at 0.6 there, but we should get a reasonable video here. So if you just want to copy these settings, this just has a nice slow zoom of 1.01. Again, if this is real high, if you have a lot of turns and movement keys, all of this acts as an orchestra. Everything acts in concert with each other to make the video. And let's go ahead and call this strength 2. This should be a fairly reasonable video. Let me see, it's still on seed 1, 250 steps. Yep. So this is kind of a good starting point for you. If you want, I will post some of the settings if you want to know some of the other settings. But basically, I have scale 12, steps 250, KLMS. The seed doesn't matter. The seed, I'm just using the same one to keep consistent here for this, but you can just find. I'd also recommend, running your animation a couple times and make sure that very first image it generates is something you want, because you can just stop it and make a new one if it's not. So keep going until you find one you like, and then you can just copy the seed on the one you like and use that. So let me show you now how many steps it's going to do. It should be doing somewhere around 125 or so, 120. Let's see. Okay, so now it's actually doing 100. Okay, so it's doing 100 steps now for each new frame, but it should stay pretty consistent to what our initial castle looks like here. Let's go ahead and see. Okay, our video just finished up here, and let me go ahead now and render this video out. And by the way, sometimes in the tutorials, I'll put the final video over here in the corner. I just do that in post-edit, so I just wanted to point that out because someone had thought that that was part of the notebook. It's not. I'm actually just adding that in later. So if you see the video over here in this area, that's just because I put it in post-edit. And there it is. Let's go ahead and look at this. So you can see that's still maintaining the shape of the castle. It is still morphing a bit, but that looks like a pretty typical kind of AI video with that changing. So let's go ahead now, and I'm going to go and change some of the other settings. And what we're going to do is this. I'm going to set the strength schedule to 0.65. So again, this is going to keep it more consistent, but might give us a little less detail. And so the other thing that can affect that is this diffusion cadence. So I'm going to put this down to 6. And this will kind of have the same thing. If this is up too high, it'll be the kind of the same thing as the strength schedule being too high, because it kind of skips the diffusion process and makes each frame look like the previous frame. So let's try this one here. So we've got 0.65 strength schedule and a 6 diffusion cadence. And again, I'm on 3D mode with a movement of just translation Z 1.01, which just gives us kind of a slow movement ahead. The other thing you can do also, well, no, we'll just keep that on 1.01. Any lower than that is really slow. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. I've put this back up to 250 steps. We have the seed 1 again. And this time we have changed that strength setting to 0.65, which I believe is the default value. And we've turned the cadence down to 6. And we'll see if this, the danger here is maybe losing some detail, but this should be a little more consistent. Let's go ahead and let it run beyond what we have there. Oh, so there we go. We are still getting quite a bit of morphing, even there at 0.65. It's still kind of shifting and changing. And part of that too is because I did turn that cadence schedule down a bit, so that's going to have it morph and change a bit more, and then we're starting to get a bit of detail loss there. So let's go ahead and let's go try this. Let's keep it at 0.65. And honestly, if this was a video that I was making at this point, I'd probably pick a different prompt, just because of where it kind of wound up going with the monochromatic colors and zooming in close there to the castle, or I do some movement changes or something. So you also kind of want to pick a video. All prompts might not be ideal for animation creation. That's just the way that it is. So let me try to do the best we can though with this prompt, and I'm going to try to turn this cadence up to 8. Okay, here we go. And you can see that, yeah, this is going to be not so good, I don't think. It looks like there's still going to be some detail loss there. So what I would do in this case, I'm going to try one more tweak here. Let's go down to, we're going to go back. We're going to get a bit of the morphing again. We're going to go down to 0.6 and 6. So that one's not too bad with the detail. And we're getting some morphing, not a crazy amount, but if this went on longer though, I have a feeling this video would start looking really bad after probably it'd start deteriorating from there. This is 200 frames, so I'd say this might be okay for, for a 200 frame video, those settings. But I'm basically just kind of showing you the main things that have effect. And again, that big one is the strength schedule. The diffusion cadence can too. The other thing to make sure you do have that depth warp checked or it will not work. The FOV, that is the wide angle. The bigger this is, the more wide angle you'll have. That could maybe, I don't want to change it now because we've had the same seed and we're testing. Let's go ahead and try this. So I have my strength schedule now at 0.6, the diffusion cadence at 6. Okay, everybody, our final render here is winding down, and I'm going to make this one the final one. I think I've got this prompt about as good as I can. And there we go. I think that is the best one, although it is still changing a bit much for me. But as far as the detail and everything goes, yeah, that's not bad. So this is kind of a good kind of setting. I would just use this setting as a base and then adjust it based on your prompt and the kind of video you're going for. So let's go ahead and move. Now 2D mode is going to be the exact same principles we just went over for 3D mode. Main difference between 2D mode and 3D mode is that in 3D mode, we have access to all these additional movement keys. And think of 3D mode like we're inside the scene, like it's a video game level and we can turn left, right, look up. Where in 2D mode, it's more like the scene is a canvas and we can shift that canvas up, down, left, to right. But again, I go over all this in my other video. So for 2D mode though, our motion, our zoom forward is handled right here under the zoom. And this translation Z either doesn't do anything or acts different. I don't think it does anything for that. I'm just going to put this to 0 for now. And I'm going to keep these other settings the same right now. Now I am going to try to turn off the depth warping for this. When you do 3D mode, this has to be on. Let's see if it has to be on for 2D, because I know this can also make it look really blurry. So what the depth warp does, it kind of creates like a field of view blur or focus. So like things in front of you are in focus, things in back. It generates depth maps basically. But let's go ahead and let me first alter this prompt a bit. Let's just put a cabin in a field. I'll just go by Thomas Kincaid. He's an artist that does a lot of kind of kitschy, kind of really bright landscape scenes with cottages with lights and kind of, real kind of Hallmark looking images. And I'm going to try him. I'm going to get rid of the fantasy art. This is another thing too. I can cut down maybe some of these modifiers might make the prompt change a little less. We'll get rid of the deviant art. We'll just keep ArtStation in there. We'll keep we'll get rid of concept art too. So I just got matte painting. Matte painting is like backdrops for movies. So that's kind of a cool modifier. So I've just got a cabin in a field by Thomas Kincaid, matte painting ArtStation. Okay, and I've got it in 2D mode now. A zoom of 1.01 and strength schedule of 0.6. We'll start at this. And I'm going to go ahead and change this. Okay, let's go ahead and run it. Okay, our video creation is winding down here, so we'll go ahead and render it. But it looks like these settings are going to be pretty good. This would be kind of a good default for you to start off with here, and I'll show them to you again here after I generate the video. There we go. Looks like that's done. Let's get rid of the castle. Let's give one more look there. Okay, yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad, but it does morph a bit. Okay, let's go ahead and create our video here out of this one. We'll see how this one turns out. So again, we're in 2D mode now, and I did turn off that depth warping. And here's what we got. And that's pretty reasonable video. It does morph a bit, but yeah, I think that has enough detail. Could have a bit more. Let's go try. I'm gonna do. Yeah, I actually kind of like this a little better than the 3D one for sure. I'm going to turn up the steps all the way to max again. And let's see if we can get away with turning that strength up a bit in this mode. And again, for the prompt, like I said, the prompt can affect it as well. And let's just go all out with the cadence here at 8.2. This will make it render faster also. Okay, so I'm going to do this the exact same. I have turned the strength up to 0.65, which is usually pushing it a bit, but I'm usually in 3D mode, so we'll see if 2D mode without that depth warping can handle this maybe, and maybe it's just the prompt. Like I said, everything kind of acts with each other. Let's go ahead and run it. So we've got the cadence at 8 and the strength schedule at 0.65. Okay, looks like our animation is winding down here, so it looks like it's going to be a little bit blurry. That's from, it's having that strength schedule up a bit higher. And that's kind of my main point here too of this, looking at the strength setting, is no setting in this is really an island unto itself. Every setting can also be affected by your other settings that you have. So there's really not any one of these where you can say, okay, this setting should always be at this. It depends on what else you have going on in the notebook. So with that one, what we just ran, I had it at 0.65 and diffusion cadence of 8. Let's go ahead and see how this turns out. And let's look at our old one here for reference. This one, I believe, was 0.65 and 6. But there's our old one. Let's go ahead and start running this one. And then our last one, we'll look at video input, which is going to be kind of a different animal altogether. This one is basically the same as the 3D mode. So there we go. So you can see that does not morph near as much now, but our image is getting a little foggy. Still, though, I kind of like this one a little better just because I really like it when they're a little more consistent. So what else we could do here? Just do one final experiment. Yeah, but I kind of like this setting. So let me go ahead and show these to you. And this is a good setting for 2D mode here that you can use as a base and then kind of tweak it a bit. So I've got my steps at 250. That again, this is also a big factor in the strength because again, the strength is going to affect how many steps it does out of these. So this will definitely affect that as well. Everything affects the scale on a little bit less of a level, but that can affect it too. And I have my strength schedule at 0.65 and the zoom at 1.01 and the cadence at 8. So what we can do here, let's turn that cadence down to 6 and try this one more time and see if we can just eliminate a bit of that blurring. Okay, our video has wound down here. Let's go ahead and let's look at this old one again for reference real quick. So this one looked all right, had really consistent kind of flickering just a little bit there, but it's a little bit foggy. Let's see if this is any better. Looks like it might not be. We'll go ahead and run it here. And so this is with our cadence up to 6 and our strength schedule at 0.65. So this is at 0.65 and kind of a slow forward crawl. And yeah, it is still kind of blurry. We're still getting kind of a blurry video there, but the consistency is pretty good there. So again, I still think this is the most important setting to understand when you're making animations is that strength setting. So basically, the higher it is, the more your frames will look consistent from frame to frame for the strength schedule, but the less detail it'll have. The lower it is, the more detail it'll have, but the less your frames will look consistent from frame to frame. So it's better to keep this as low as possible to get more detail, but still get the coherence that you want. So just adjust it based on how coherent you want your video to be. And one thing I've done too lately that I really like is I've been making videos with art galleries. because that's something that kind of actually takes advantage of the images changing, because you get a whole bunch of pictures that are kind of changing into different pictures all the time. So I thought that was kind of an ideal kind of a video for this sort of medium. But anyways, let's go ahead now and let's just go ahead and move on to the video input, because that is probably the hardest to understand, because it kind of has a secret setting here. So I've already got my input video ready to go. So that's the first thing I'm going to do here, is drag my input video over into my session here, which will get deleted after the session's done. And while that's uploading, I'm going to go ahead and set it up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the animation mode to video input. And the next thing I will do is change our prompt a bit here. Let's see, I'm just going to take out, I'm going to put futuristic cars. This video just has some cars kind of moving slowly in a Blade Runner city. Something really cliche here, something I know how it'll generate it. And I'm not even going to use an artist. I'm just going to put art station and deviant art. We'll see how this comes out. Okay, so the very first thing here about, so we're going to keep our strength up there is still going to do kind of the same thing. It's going to determine the consistency from frame to frame. But here is something else very important to know about input video. And it's really not intuitive at all. But the other thing that affects this is down here under our init setting. So even though we don't have init checked here, and this is not something we normally mess with on our videos, for input videos, this affects it. So if you see where it says strength 0, what this means is when it very first diffuses the very first frame of the video, it's not going to use the video at all, actually. It's going to mainly just use the prompt. It might use the video a little bit, but rather than telling you, let me go ahead and just show you, and let me check this too. So the movement parameters don't matter in an input video. I've done a tutorial also on input videos, so I'd recommend you watch that if you don't know how to do that. And it also explains this. Basically, this extract nth frame. This just tells it to skip every other frame. If you want it to not render every single frame of the video, you can set this to 2, and then it'll just render every second frame. If you set it to 4, it'll render every fourth frame. So that'll really turn down your FPS though. So if this is on 2, this would turn a 24 frame per second video into a 12 frame per second video, basically. If it's on 4, it would turn a 24 per second video into a 6 frame per second video. So I'm just going to leave it on 1. I'm not sure how, the video is only about 10 seconds. I'm not sure how many frames it's going to be, but it'll show us when it starts rendering. So I've got futuristic cities, and okay, and again, I've got my strength out, and again, even though this isn't checked, this use init is not checked, this right here, this strength setting will affect how it first generates that first frame. So I'm going to go ahead and start running it, see how many frames this is going to be, and also just to show you what it'll look like here at 0. Oh, let's see, something. Oh yeah, the other thing too, when you're using an input video, put it on fixed. You do not want it on iteration for this. So let's go ahead and try to run this again. Oh wait, I need to copy my path. That's what I did not do. Okay, so once I have put my movie over here, I need to right click it, copy it, and then we go over here. Again, I have a tutorial on this, which I should have watched to refresh myself. Okay, and then we put it right here in video init path. Okay, there we go. Okay, and I'll just change my batch name here to car just to keep it straight later. Okay, we should be off and running now. Okay. Okay, there we go. And it is starting. So it looks like this is going to be 320 frames. That's not too bad. I can go ahead and keep it on 1. So if I put that on 2, this would turn it into about a 160 frame video. So this is on 0. So this is not going to look anything like the video. I'm just going to say that right now. And I'll put it on 1 after this so you can see what the initial video does look like. But right now, this is just going to use basically just my prompt. It's going to just pretty much completely ignore the video because of this. Not because of the strength up there, but because of the strength right here under the init setting. So you see there's our car in a Blade Runner city. And again, this looks nothing like the actual video. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And now I'm going to change the strength here. If you notice, even use this in the init is not checked. It's still going to use this. Now I'm going to put it like 1. Now this will make it look exactly like the video. This will not change it hardly at all. So it'll render real fast, but it's not doing anything. So I'll just do this to show you what the original video looks like. Okay, yep. So this is the original video. So this just looks like the normal video. So what we want here is kind of a usually middle ground like 0.5, 0.6. It just depends on how much you want to change the video. If you want to change it a lot, put it low. If you want it to change it just a little bit, put it high. And I'm going to put it on 0.6. That 0.6 is kind of a magic number that you can kind of use for everything, usually for the strength, and that'll give you usually pretty close results to what you're going for. So let's go ahead and try 0.6 here. So you see it's right here where it's using the video init frame. That's why it uses this section even without that check. So that's a really important setting, and it's not very intuitive. So if you see, this did kind of change it. So that's kind of cool. Should we change it maybe a little bit more? Let's go ahead and change it just a little bit more. Let's try 0.5. Again, especially when you're first making a video, especially if you haven't tested it, like you can test this by doing a starting image like a still frame from the video, but you can also just do what I'm doing here and just start it and stop it until you get that first frame how you want. And again, it is going to kind of, it's going to be affected by the other strength up there as well. We'll get to that after this. First thing we want to do is just get this changed to an amount that we're comfortable with. That's still, now it's kind of looking a little bit cartoonish, which is kind of cool. Let's go just a little, you know what, let's leave it there because it's going to start morphing a bit too anyway. So let's go ahead. Oh yeah, this is the other thing too. You can turn, I usually turn the scale up a bit for these. So let's just do that first. Let's just try turning the scale up. Okay, there we go. That looks kind of cool. That's going to make it kind of look like a cartoon or something. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop there. And I got the strength schedule at 0.65 right now. Let's go ahead and keep that at 0.6. I'm just going to put that on 0.6. And I don't believe Diffusion Cadence is going to do anything here. Okay, everybody, so the animation is coming along now. I'm just going to go ahead and stop it here. It's about frame 200 out of 320. Should work okay, even though I stopped it. It'll just render whatever frames are there. And then for the next one, what I'm going to do is keep the settings the same, except for I'm just going to go and adjust the strength schedule up there in the animation part. So here's what we've got there. And so you can see it's still morphing quite a bit there. But that's our input video mode there with strength. So let's go. And what we can do here is make this, well, you know what, let's just keep that at 0.5 for now. And let's see how this affects it. Let's put this on 0.9 just to do a real good test and see if that is still affecting it. I'm not sure if it is actually. Okay, let's go ahead and run this again. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to play this one more time just to kind of get an idea in my head of what it looks like. Yeah, that's definitely the case. So it's still running 125. So that strength setting up there does absolutely nothing. So let's see how this turns out. And this isn't a prompt either. I've done too much experimenting or anything with. Okay, so that looks like it's changing it enough. That doesn't look like the regular car. So that does look different. So let's go ahead and let this setting run for a bit and we'll see what kind of video we can get out of this one. Okay, so I'll go ahead and let this run for a little while and we will come check back. This should have a little bit less morphing than this video here. It'll also, like I said, it'll be running a little bit choppier just because I've cut out half the frames. So that'll keep the time the same. It won't like speed it up, but it depends on how you throw the video together. But it will be choppier because it's only rendering half the frames per second. Okay, so we'll go ahead and let this run for a little bit and come check on it when it's done. Okay, guys, it hasn't finished up yet. It's done about, looks like 60 frames here, but I'm going to go ahead and stop it just to show you this. One other thing, too, I want to point out that you can get away with when doing video input is you can turn the strength schedule up really high. You will not get that problem that you get on a regular video where it'll turn into noise after a while. What'll happen is it'll just turn into your regular video after a while. So your regular video will always be the underlying base, so you won't have that issue where it turns into pixels and stuff. So the only downside to turning up the strength on an input video is that it might still look pretty much like your regular video, which is not the reason you're doing this. So let me go ahead and stop this here, and this is at 0.6 now. And we'll go ahead and let me just double check that. Yeah, it's still at 0.6 right there, the strength. Okay. So let's go ahead and compare that to this one. It should morph a little less than this one. I also did change the frames per second, so it might go a little faster. But this one looks all right, but it had quite a bit of morphing going on. So let's see if this curtailed some of that somewhat. And then I'll show you how we can turn this thing up really high. The other good thing too about that is it'll render really quick. Okay, so let's see how this looks. Okay, so that's kind of cool. See, this is kind of usually what we go for with these input videos. We want it to change, but still kind of maintain some of the original aspects of the video. So we're still getting some morphing in particular areas. And some videos are just not good for input video, so you know you want to pick your videos too. This one looks like it would be pretty decent. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time tweaking on this one. I just kind of wanted to show you that strength setting. So, and this one too probably has an even wider range of what you want to use than the regular videos, because a lot of it will depend on the video you're using. So let's go ahead and I'll show you. I can turn this thing all the way up to like 0.8, and this will maintain a lot of coherency, but it won't change the video very much. So that's really the only downside to turning that up. So if you see now, it's only doing 49 iterations per frame. Yeah, so that still looks pretty similar to the original video. But this is going to be real coherent. It's not going to change very much either from frame to frame. So that's kind of what I usually shoot for when I go for an input video. I want to get it to where it still changes, but I try to get that setting basically as high as I can, but still have the video change enough where it looks different and it looks cool and it doesn't just look like the original video. Otherwise, there's no point to it, right? And so this one looks like it's, you know, it's not changing quite enough, so I'd want to turn this down more. But I just wanted to point that out, that that's the only downside in input video to turn in the strength up modifier. I'll just put Vincent Van Gogh and nothing else. And I'll turn this down a little bit more. Let's go ahead and put this to 0.75. Let's see if we can get it to kind of do a Van Gogh style here. And that ought to do it. I'll go ahead and let this render and I'll close out. I'll go ahead and let this run. I'll close out with this final video here. Thank you for watching, and I will have more tutorials, videos, and other exciting things coming soon. I'm also going to do finally start my tutorials on a program I use where you can type words in and the program will sing the words for you and sound like a beautiful female human singer. And I'll be posting that very soon, hopefully maybe even today or later in the next couple of days. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later, and I will post this final video when it's done as well to close this session out. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.